Hello everyone, and welcome to the Happiness Index's Creating an Autism-Friendly Workplace in Inclusion Week. So today we're going to talk about how can organisations create a more neuro-inclusive environment. We, the Happiness Index, for those that don't know who we are a happiness and engagement platform. If you want to know how all of your employees think and feel, go to thehappinessindex.com, book a demo, and the team will take you through that. What we're going to be talking about today, luckily, I am here to ask the questions, and I am here with Lucy Bond and Nat Hawley, and I'm going to bring them both. So we're going to take down the slides and get them out of the way. We're going to bring everyone back and we can see everyone. So Lucy, I'm going to go to you first to introduce yourself, please.
Hello, I'm very pleased to be here. I'm Lucy Bond. I am the head of HR for the UK and EEA for Man Group, which is an active investment manager.
Thanks, Lucy. And Nat?
Well, hi everyone. My name's Nat, and I'm the head of community at an organisation called Exceptional Individuals, which is a social enterprise that supports people with dyslexia, dyspraxia, and autism. And myself is neurodivergent, just like 80% of all my colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Nat. Thanks, Lucy. So the first question, just to kick off, we were sort of talking about this on the pre-record, how something like autism is something that is, people are very aware of the term and the phrase, but I do wonder if people actually really know what it means. So Nat, just to sort of anchor the conversation, what is autism and how many people in the UK are autistic?
Okay, well, it's a complex question, but in a nutshell, autism is autism spectrum disorder. That's the official term. Though some people like to call it autism spectrum condition, that's more of a softer way of talking about it, which is less clinical. But essentially, it's developmental disability that causes differences in the brain, and it can affect people in many, many, many different ways. It can affect repetitive behavior, it can have unique interests, it can have an impact on communication. Essentially, it's a different way that the brain is wired and processes information. It's got a really, really rich history. There's lots of names. Some people might know it as Asperger's, some might call it classic autism, others might just say ASPI, but it all means just difference in how we process information. And as to the amount of people, to throw some stats out there, and depends where you go, but neurodiverse individuals, so that includes things like dyslexia, dyspraxia, autism, ADHD, all of those, it's about 7 to 15% of the population, so a decent chunk. And autism is 1 in 57 is the kind of go-to stat in terms of how many people we believe in the UK might have autism. But obviously it could be a lot higher due to underdiagnosing and people not really talking about it because of stigma.
Yeah, and that, just before we sort of go into some of the further questions, in terms of diagnosing it, I'm just thinking a couple of ways around for our HR professionals that are listening. So if yourself feel like you've maybe read up a bit, you've read the NHS website and you feel that you may be autistic yourself, and when we're talking about adults in the workforce here, what would your first step be, Nat?
Well, first of all, those sort of things online about, oh, am I autistic, are a lot like reading a horoscope. I'll tell you a funny story, because for years, I thought my birthday was on a completely different month, and I was reading the horoscopes and like, this is exactly me. Then I find out it's Virgo and I'm like, oh, that also sounds exactly like me. So we can always put like these criteria for diagnosing someone to ourselves. There's nothing unique with the criteria of autism that is only in autistic people. It kind of is in all of us. The difference is, though, is how does it affect us and to what level? Does it kind of stop us from living our best life? Does it make other things more difficult? So first of all, if you think you might have autistic qualities, if it's not having a negative impact on your life or stopping you from doing what you want to do, doesn't really matter. It's just a different way of being. If you do think you have autism, though, the first thing I would recommend is maybe there's some quizzes online. They're not scientific, do not rely on them, but they're a good starting point for a discussion. Then, if you still think you have it, you could go to your GP. And GPs do diagnose for autism in the UK, but is it easy? No. So then you've got another option. Do you wait for the GP or do you go private? Both are good options. Private, if you can afford it, a lot quicker. But one of the biggest kind of questions I would ask a adult, which is different advice to what I would give to someone with children, is what is the benefit you hope to receive by getting a diagnosis? Because ideally, in an inclusive environment and work culture, the support you get for being diagnosed and just resonating or having your own ways of working should ideally be the exact same. The key benefit that most people I work with get from receiving a later diagnosis in life is that kind of that reassurance to themselves that they're not broken, they're not dumb, they're not stupid. There's a reason why their brain works the way they work. So it's more for a personal reason rather than if you do this, you'll have access to a whole new avenue of support.
Yeah, no, that is, I need to come back to that because there's a couple of bits there, but I just want to bring Lucy on a point there that I found fascinating, which is around how actually if you're in an inclusive, because the thing I took from that, it was saying actually if you feel like you might be autistic, you only necessarily need to go and get help if it's actually challenging the environment that you're in. And then that second point around how if you're actually in an inclusive environment, you can actually be yourself and these qualities can actually be appreciated. In terms of culture, Lucy, have you got any thoughts on that? Because I think it's such a positive way that Nat has described that to us.
I think one of the things is to recognise everyone engages in a different way, whether you're on the autistic spectrum or not. And so in terms of providing opportunities for people to give feedback to you or getting your message out there, some people respond well through reading, some people respond well through listening to something, some people respond well through, Slack versus email, etc. The more opportunities you have for people to engage with each other and to tell you what they're thinking, the better off you'll be.
Thanks, Lucy. And now I just want to go back to the other point now about a manager who may be working with an employee where they may think that the person they're working is autistic, because there's a lot of boundaries here to discuss. But scenario this morning from the world of sport, I was on the school run. I was talking to one of my friends who's a Premier League football coach, and they were talking about one of their players that had been released from the club. And that player is now doing really well elsewhere. And now everyone's talking about this player being worth millions and millions of pounds. And I said, why were they released? And they said at first, there's lots of people in the club that felt that person was difficult. And the coach said to me, I actually thought that the person was autistic, but nobody spoke about it or approached it. Can you approach someone, like if you've got someone in your team and you think they might be autistic, what are the boundaries? What do you do if you're listening to this and you're thinking that someone could get help, as you described it earlier? Any thoughts on what you could do there, Nat, or do you just have to stay out of it and wait for that person to explore it themselves?
I mean, it's a really good question. And with all these answers today, there's not really going to be a one fits all kind of answer. But typically, with autism, yes, it's a hidden disability, but it's not really hidden. Everyone knows there's something there. People don't really want to talk about it, but honestly, there's no harm in addressing it. I find that people walk on eggshells when it comes to disabilities, mental health, any of that type of things. And it's far better to address it, talk to it. The important thing here isn't whether or not this individual was autistic. That's irrelevant. The important thing is here they were struggling with communication and being misinterpreted. So labels aside, because only privileged people have labels, lots of people just go undiagnosed, is about working with them. This individual probably would have no idea if they do have autism. It's kind of, they don't have that filter. They're being blunt, they're being upfront, they're being honest. They see no reason why not. The best thing you can do is just talk to people, have a discussion, research up on autism, understanding the context, understanding the deficits, strengths can be really useful in how you engage that conversation. But the end result shouldn't be trying to a witch hunt saying, come on, tell us you're autistic. They may never tell you, they may never know, but all the ways that you can support an autistic person, if done correctly, would also benefit someone who isn't autistic. And I think that's the best advice. Treat people like you would treat anyone else, but know that if you suspect certain qualities, the same support strategies would also benefit them. That's
such positive advice, isn't it, Lucy? That this helps communicating better helps everyone, doesn't it? Lucy, anything you want to add to that?
Gosh, we're in our second year of our partnership with Exceptional Individuals, which is led by Nat from the get-go, and it's fantastic, right? So the knowledge that he brings to us, the opportunity to have the conversation. Nat first went to our senior executive committee and spoke to them. They said, this is fantastic, you should meet our executive committee, presented to them, and we've rolled it out through the organisation. And the support that it gives for our staff and the managers as well, and the learning that we get from it as well is irreplaceable, I would.
Lucy, thanks for giving it as a bit of insight into how you brought exceptional individuals into your organisation. But if someone else is listening and they're thinking, my company could benefit from an organisation like that, have you got any advice for a HR professional that's thinking, I'd love to get something like this into our organisation? Any advice on how you speak to people about how important this is?
Yes. As you look at diversity in the round and you develop those different techniques and those different spaces and different ways of engaging people, this is just part of that. You're never just done, are you, right? You're always trying to be better. You're always trying to provide those different safe spaces. If someone hasn't come and spoken to you in one way, they will come and talk to you in another way. It mightn't be that you have to launch a partnership, but as Nat said earlier, read up, educate yourself, and look at your practices. Are you engaging people? Are you not engaging people? What could you do slightly differently? Be more open-minded.
Yeah. No, thank you, Lucy. And that, can you sort of bring us in, especially as it is Inclusion Week, what are the main challenges autistic people face around employment generally?
Well, I'd say the main problems is a lack of understanding. There's nothing inherently wrong with them, but the society they grew up in wasn't created for their type of mindset. It just so happens that the world we live in is best suited for those who are neurotypical. And had things panned out a different way, maybe people who have autism would be the ones kind of making the decisions. So I think it's important to appreciate the historical context, and also that the word like autism isn't that old in terms of as a known thing, only like 100 years. From when people thought it was schizophrenia, to when people were doing like electric shock therapy, to when World War II was happening, and those who were considered valuable were kind of trained for super soldiers, and those considered not valuable were euthanized. And then you go into like the 70s when you had like refrigerator mothers, where essentially if you had a child who was autistic, you were a bad mum, you didn't hug your child enough, you were cold. So right up to now, where we kind of have people are talking about it, we're making great support, mud sticks, and there's still this kind of baggage that has been kind of brought along with us.
Yeah.
So what I say is do not underplay. Like, if you think, well, why is it a big deal? Why are we talking about this? Why are people not disclosing? Would you disclose if you thought there was any chance that people would misinterpret you, if people would treat you differently, if people would make an assumption about your intelligence?
Yeah.
I think education really is the best thing we can do forward. But one thing I would add is, when I talk about education, I don't just mean on the employer side or on the public. I also mean for those who have autism, because unfortunately, we're normally slapped with a label and said, have a good day, but we're not told what it means. So we're not able to articulate ourselves. So typically, it's two people who speak different languages butting heads, even though they want the exact same outcome. So if both people can understand, almost like a translator, you get a far better result at the end.
Yeah, thanks, Nat. And Lucy, what are the strengths that autistic people can bring to an organisation?
Yep. I mean, I suppose it's a bit stereotypical because what works for one person who's autistic doesn't necessarily work for another. But if we talk generally, there are tremendous strengths in attention to detail. Also, massive in-depth knowledge on certain subjects, which might be, you know, for us, perhaps particular languages in coding, or knowledge of a particular trading system, high levels of concentration, focus, persistence. I do think if someone on the autistic spectrum has a role, they find taps into their interest and passion and they feel valued, that person will reward their employer with loyalty, reliability, conscientiousness, some of the strengths.
And that's the thing, like even as I read the question out, I didn't even like the question because, again, and I suppose because we're already learning from that here, everything that you just described, everyone would want. So
yeah, I mean, not everyone can pay attention to coding for 10 hours a day though. Not everyone can have that particular type of focus.
No, absolutely. And I suppose that leads us nicely on to recruitment, because you're telling the picture we've got so far, and I like Kevin Wiffane's description broadly on diversity inclusion is I really like, which is the word underestimated. So we've potentially got a group of people, going back to what Nat was saying, that historically have been underestimated. But we've also got a group of people that Lucy's telling us that can bring so much to the workforce. And I'm now thinking people are listening that and they're thinking, well, I want to make sure that I get these people into my business. Can you give us some tips on recruitment, please, Nat?
Okay, sure. Well, first of all, I'd say stop. Do not bring these people into the organization. You're going to set yourself up for failure. Right. When you were talking about I know you said it was a bad worded question, but like, what are the strengths of people who have autism? I'd say, what are the strengths of people named Matt? It makes no sense because it's so individual and so unique to people. And this has been a continuous theme with autism. It's why we had Asperger's and we had autism. It was kind of to separate them, the ones who had these amazing strengths and those who didn't. And this is why we call it ASD now, because it's a more inclusive way of saying everyone shows strengths in different ways. A good example is people who are non-verbal. Traditionally, they would have been seen as low functioning, which is now known as offensive. But they can be exceptionally intelligent. Some of the best people on our team are near non-verbal, and yet you wouldn't want to have a pub quiz without them because of those exceptional skills and hyper-focused.
Yeah.
As to, should I hire someone with autism? Yeah, but this isn't like going to a recruitment company and say, I need some expert coders. Can you get me some autistic people? Because autism is so vast and diverse. What you want to do is build up to it. So what we do at Exceptional Individuals, we do it like a 3-tier approach. We start off with education, teach people what is autism. Then we go beyond that. What is the value that it can bring to a company? How can we support them develop? And then once we feel everyone has a basic knowledge, then we move on to supporting your current staff. There's no point bringing new people in if you haven't got it right at home. So what support do you offer? If people do disclose, is it a token gesture, or are there hard and fast things that are being put into place? Have you got it right first? I think diversity and inclusion, as we all appreciate, is a really valuable area. But unfortunately, it does tend to be flavor of the month. Oh, this month we're going to do this demographic. Next month we're doing that demographic.
Yeah.
And that can normally result in half-baked ideas that people start but not really finish. If you want to be successful with autism and have benefit from the strengths that come with it, you also need to build up the system to support with the things that they find naturally difficult, because going back to the fact that society wasn't created for their mindset. You can't have all the good stuff without supporting the things of the challenges. Because in a real nutshell, all autism is the fluctuation of ability, being really great at some things, but finding other things more difficult in comparison to the general population. It's not about deficits. It's not about strengths. It's just about like a bit more of a spiky profile.
Yeah. So that's really useful then, isn't it, Nat? Because what we're talking about here is diversity within people that have autism.
Mm.
And in terms of recruitment and in terms of where you start. And I want to make sure that I've understood it for the audience. What you're advising is that you start with the foundation with the people in your organization first and then build out from there. Is that right, Nat, or have I misunderstood that?
No, that's completely right. No one wants to be a guinea pig. I think, ask yourself, how many people in our organization has disclosed publicly that they have autism? Let's have a guess there, maybe one or two out of like hundreds of thousands of people potentially. That, or either you're beating the odds and somehow autistic people never join the organization because your recruitment processes unintentionally discriminate them, or people don't feel comfortable to talk about it. So this is something you need to tackle on first. How can we make people feel comfortable with who we already have? And then once you start to get a bit of momentum on that, which isn't going to be an overnight thing, that's when you can start to bring people in. You know, people with like, you know, to disclose to someone you are neurodiverse or have autism with the context of the history that I've already mentioned takes tremendous amounts of courage. And they have spent their whole life being put down and feeling not as adequate. You do not want to make that worse and add upon that. You want their first experience to be their best experience. And if you do that, that's when you'll start to benefit from all the positives that we mentioned, the high retention rate, the detailed orientation, the kind of loyalty, the flexibility, the innovation. That comes, but that only comes at the end once we've gotten the other things right to begin with.
Yeah. Lucy, thanks, Nat. Anything to add to that, Lucy?
I do think there's something to add on the different types of what I would call perhaps interviewing. So certainly when we recruit, if you were coming in as a software engineer, you might be set a homework task, which is something you can do at home in your own time to reflect your expertise. You then might have a very short interview where you talk to somebody about that homework task and you explain what you did. You might then do a pair programming exercise where you sit alongside somebody and you're given a task and you work a bit alone, but a bit with them on a particular coding exercise. So all of those are testing your skill set, but not in a very traditional, tell me your biggest strength or tell me your biggest weakness, or where would you like to be in 5 years' time? You know, those sorts of questions that sometimes come off by rote in an interview process. It's about mixing it up, I think, so you get a really good idea of people's strength and their skill set.
No, really, that's so useful, Lucy, and really practical as well, so thank you. One of the things that we know about at the Happiness Index about allowing all human beings to thrive at work is to allow them to be listened to. We've talked about different communication styles and communications being key here. Is there anything when we talk about listening and listening to our employees, and I suppose it goes back to the original point of building an inclusive culture for autistic people, is there anything specific we need to do here, or is it very similar to what a forward-thinking company would be doing now?
One of the things we have done as we've worked with exceptional individuals is provide a kind of stages, if you like. So to Nat's point, to provide an education session, so a webinar on, for example, ASD, and then to provide a manager masterclass. So, excuse me, people managers come along, get a chance to ask questions, they get a chance to digest what they've learned and explore it a bit further. Then we also have other things like a drop-in clinic that exceptional individuals run for us, where people can book up 30 minutes, come along and talk to a member of staff of exceptional individuals, workplace assessment needs. And then we try to follow that through with, for example, manager masterclasses coming onto a smaller group where people can really talk about, you know, perhaps they've got a particular challenge that they faced as a manager, and then onto peer mentoring circles. So you've almost a learning experience, an opportunity for discussion, another opportunity for discussion and listening, and then a further, almost like a support group, I suppose, that follows you through, where you've got continuous support, advice, and opportunity to talk and listen to other people.
Just on that, Lucy, just a practical question. Nat was saying earlier that sometimes just generally people don't talk about things like autism, and sometimes people like not sure whether they should have the conversation at work, or like me, I'm asking you all the questions that are coming to my head because I'm happy to do that. But I can imagine some people in the workforce might be worried about asking questions in case they look stupid or say the wrong thing. Did you have to work to help people feel comfortable to ask questions?
Yeah, and that comes with working with somebody like Nat, who leads the session and says, there's no stupid question here. You know, here's some of the vocabulary. Ask me anything.
Yeah, brilliant. Lucy, as Nat, as you've involved in that answer, anything that you'd like to add to that in making everyone feel comfortable?
Well, I think the way you've been interviewing obviously is a really good start as well. You listen to what we say and then you say what you got from it, because we appreciate that those with autism don't necessarily communicate poorly. They communicate differently to the like the neurotypical person they're talking with. So just clarifying, is this what you meant by this? And also giving people multiple ways of being able to communicate their strengths. So I'm more than happy to talk, as I'm showing right now. But if you were to talk to me via email, you're going to get like a reply from a 7-year-old. It's not going to make any sense. The full stops are all over the place. It's just terrible, because I'm also dyslexic. So it's about finding the way that works best for me. But someone with autism, for example, they might like more clarity. So you can verbally speak with them, but then write it up secondary. So I think you've got to know the person on the individual level and what works for them. Does it matter whether or not they have a diagnosis? No. But if you speak with them and you find out the solution that works best for them, everyone's going to be better off. I am not the expert on your colleague with autism. You are not the expert on your colleague with autism. They might not even be the expert. But I tell you, they're the nearest thing you're going to get. They know their brain better than anyone else. So work with it and not against it. And you'll create a really nice, happy environment where people feel listened to and supported, even if no one is completely sure on what the right answer is just yet.
I think thanks, Nat. And I think that's another example of something that, if we do that, that helps someone with autism. But if we do that, that also helps everyone, because at the Happiness Index, we've been talking about that. Like, what is the first port of communications? Just for everyone, just to like have a logo. Like, what's the best way? Because like when I started my career, it's just totally normal for people to pick up a phone to each other. But now there's so many people that just that's not how they entered the workforce. And actually, that's just around like what Nat was saying around neurotypical earlier. That's how that world would have been built. But now we've got the advantage to just ask everyone individually how they'd like to be communicated with. Anything to add to that, Lucy, at all?
No, I just really love that idea that you had. You could have a little, please contact me like this, in the way that you have a busy kind of low icon that you turn on, which is a do not disturb me, or I'm in a meeting. I quite like that. You know, I prefer you to come and talk to me. I prefer you to call me. I prefer you to Slack me. It's a good idea. I
think we also have, how do you apologize to me? It's like, is it we were working on the other day, is it cake? Is it this? Is it that? Matt, what's the one question that people don't ask you in your work that you wish that they did?
When's my birthday?
When's your birthday,
Matt? It was last week. But no.
Happy birthday.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
What's the question? I think that's a really difficult question. I think people tend to ask me a lot, but I think the thing they probably miss is just talking on the cuff. People are so scared of saying the wrong things that people talk a little bit robotically to me, or they're kind of scared of like saying the wrong thing. You can't offend me. And to be honest, a lot of people with autism, we are naturally quite offensive, not intentionally, but the way we process information, we do not have that filter. So it's okay. We'll probably have the highest level of empathy when it comes to putting our foot in it. So you're allowed to do it too. The thing is about correcting people. Like if you say, oh, I have a son who's high functioning, I know that's not reused anymore for many reasons, but I'm still going to listen to you, and then I'll comfortably correct you afterwards, not in a shaming way, but in a just so you know. And that's the thing with autism. No one has all the answers, so you're not ever going to look stupid. The thing is, it's completely in flux. It's always changing. And all we can really say is most people experience it this way. Most people will like to be called it this way, but ultimately it doesn't matter. I think if you can explain why you go this way. So like if you say, oh, people autistic parents were quite cold. I believe that because of these things, then I can kind of correct you calmly. So it's not, so the answer to the question is, it's not so much what aren't people asking, it's that they're not really asking like just how they truly feel. Everyone's got these biases, everyone has these stigmas attached, and it's far better to be upfront with them and acknowledge them rather than just kind of keep it in the background and feel that your questions aren't truly answered.
That's so powerful, Matt. And Lucy, obviously you've been working with exceptional individuals. The more that you've worked with them, have you seen your colleagues feel more comfortable to do what Nat is saying, to just be able to ask those questions? Has that changed over time? So now you talked about Nat delivering those sessions, but I'd love to know what it's like on the ground.
I do think so. In our people manager population, what we still don't have is, our diversity, equity and inclusion umbrella comprises a few networks and work streams. We don't have a network for our neurodiverse population. That's something Nat challenges us on, and he's right to do so. We've been working on this for a while, and if I think about our next gen work stream or our Pride at Man work stream, people come forward and say, I would like to do this, I would like to organise it, I would like to have this event, etc., open this conversation. No one has done that. That doesn't mean they don't want to, it just means we haven't given them the right opportunities, or perhaps listened hard enough, or we haven't tapped the right population yet. So it's important not to be complacent, right, and to think, well, no one's coming to ask us for that, so maybe we don't need it. Maybe everyone's very comfortable.
Yeah. Just on that complacency bit, Lucy, two things I've learned from that so far is the diversity within autism. And yes, you mentioned earlier, Nat, that sometimes certain things are on the agenda and certain things are not. So sometimes autism is something people are talking about, sometimes it's not. Lucy, and I'm getting you to answer for all companies in the world, so this is a hard question, but how do you obviously care about this and think this is important, right? Because you wouldn't be here today discussing it. But how have you managed to keep it on the agenda for people and avoid what Nat was explaining, where suddenly it's like the important thing and then it disappears? How have you kept that going in the organisation?
I think it's in part due to our senior leadership interest, and from almost ever since I've been here, which is about 7.5 years, we have identified 2 pathways to success. So one is through being a subject matter expert, and one is through being a people manager. So it's very clearly known in our organisation that success does not equate to being a leader or a manager of many people. You can be equally successful by being a subject matter expert. And that talks to our population who don't feel comfortable as people managers. You don't have to do that to succeed here. And our senior leadership team have been very, very clear on that. So I think partly down to that, and partly because we are a massively data-driven firm. So we know, and to Nat's point, not all software engineers are on the autistic spectrum or neurodiverse, but we do have a population who tells us that they are. And so we need to look after those people, provide an environment where they thrive, where they feel welcome, where they feel valued, and listen to all of those things.
Yeah, thanks, Lucy. Nat, we've obviously been talking about Lucy's organisation, but you're working with other organisations and business people out there. Have you got any advice from other organisations that you've seen and you thought, right, they've done a good job there?
Definitely. I mean, just on a small bit on Man Group, they genuinely are doing a really good job, mainly because it's consistency. It's a lot of organizations will have, say, a bit of budget and they'll just do one thing and expect instant results. This isn't a tick box exercise. This is something you do over time. And I think what Man does particularly well is acknowledge that people's life isn't their work. There's more to it. So they do sessions for parents, learning about it, appreciating that it can also affect people's home life, which eventually does impact their work life. They get people who's senior in the organization to publicly talk about their experience. So it's breaking down that stigma where autism is only for entry-level people. In other organizations, we've done different things where we've done specialized recruitment days where, for instance, people could apply through multiple different methods. They could apply through traditional written application, they could apply through video application, even like drawing comic books. We've done kind of events where it celebrates different abilities. We've created networks. But I think probably the biggest thing that I've seen work really well is consistency. Letting this be something that works all the time, and make sure that the support available is being taken seriously by everyone. Having a CEO pop up and do join the webinar for a minute is cool, but having them stick around, really showing that this means something to them, that this is important, and saying, you know what, I don't know if I'm neurodiverse, but I have these qualities, and if I was, I'd be proud of it. And really putting your money where your mouth is, and let's seeing the output. Because again, it's talked about, but are the policies actually being done? I don't think organizations need to be perfect, but at least actively approving and always reevaluating what they're doing. And genuinely, I work with amazing, amazing organizations. The biggest challenge is out-of-date information. It's about having these ideas in their head about what they think will work, and then being surprised when it doesn't work.
Yeah.
The ones who listen the best are the ones who get the best results.
That's so interesting. Again, I just want to capture that point on consistency, because it comes up so much, doesn't it? Whether you're talking about entrepreneurs or sports people or doctors or anyone who does anything really well, it's doing that thing consistently over time. So I'm just logging that in mine and the listener's brain. I think it's a really good point, that because sometimes people don't want to hear consistency because it's not always the most exciting thing, but it is a massive part of success. Lucy, any reaction to any of the stuff you've heard there from that before we go into closing?
I'll help you remember that point by saying we often say to each other, it's the Chumbawamba song. Do you remember this song?
Yeah.
I get knocked down, but I get up again. The resilience, the consistency, that doesn't work out how you think it did. Pick yourself up, off you go, try again.
Everyone's singing that now, Lucy, that knows that song.
Absolutely. Now they'll remember.
Cool. In terms of HR professionals, Lucy, we're talking to your, I'm trying to think of the word, they're not your colleagues. What are they? They're not your brethren.
Peers.
Your peers. You say peers? Your peers. Here we go. So do you have any tips for other HR people who want to create an inclusive environment for neurodiverse people?
I think there are probably two things. I think one is not to rely on people to pick up on the unwritten rules of the workplace. That's not just for your neurodiverse population, that applies to, it's recently come up as we've been exploring social mobility in the workplace and social economic status. As you sit down at a dinner, not everyone knows which side your side plate's on. Not everyone knows what a side plate is. There are unwritten rules that we expect people to navigate, even though they've never ever been told them. We expect them to pick up and just learn those through osmosis. Don't rely on that. Be clear, be direct about your expectations and your goals for people. Tell them what your firm's strategy is and how that links to what they're doing. And the other is to ask for help and accept the challenge. I've spoken about the way Nat's challenged us. Keep going, be consistent, make it your thing. Fit it in, explore the different ways you can get it done, and bring everyone with you. Listen.
Wow, I think that is a massive mind blower, I think, for people that are listening, which is understanding the unwritten rules, because every company has them, every family has them, don't they? Friendship groups have them. Any practical advice on how we actually do that? Because that sounds that every company's got it, haven't they, Lucy? Anything practical on that you could add?
I should name check my colleague Appy Thacker, who came up with that recently when he was sitting on a panel for social mobility. I think it's more about talking about it. You can provide all the information you need access to the information in a different way, and we've spoken about that already, a podcast, maybe a Slack channel, a conversation, everybody learns differently, but having the process, I suppose, charting it out, but talking about it as well, and having those direct channels of communication, like, I want to get this done, where do I go, who do I talk to, how does it work?
Thanks, Lucy. And that just one last question I just want to pick up on. We mentioned earlier that we want Lucy to start like an internal community, and that would be a recommendation. I'm not picking on you now, Lucy, but Nat, can you just tell us like what that would look like in another organization? Like what would an internal community look like?
Okay, well, first of all, I've seen it done wrong many times, and I think Man Group is doing the right thing by taking their time, because pushing it has often ended in disaster. There's, when you look at other kind of groups and communities, let's say you've got like a women's group, an LGBT group, you know, they are great. And they're great because there's one common thing bringing people together, which they can talk about and discuss and support. Now, when it comes to autism, that's very, very difficult, because normally you're not going to get an autism group. It's kind of too niche. But a disability group is way too wide, because not everyone who's neurodiverse resonates with being disabled. So a neurodiversity group seems like a really great fit. Now, does that bind them all together, give something to unite? No, because neurodiversity is about being diverse. Someone with autism and dyslexia, they might not be able to relate. Someone with autism and autism might not be able to relate. So there's a lot more kind of potential frictions or communication challenges that need to be addressed first. This is why we normally set up a program in advance. We do like mentoring, coaching, we kind of prepare people to be chairs. And it's actually one of the most difficult groups to set up, but it's really, really rewarding. And it's making sure everyone's on the same page, everyone feels listened to. But then you've got other questions, you know, is it people who are only diagnosed that can attend? Yes or no? Is it people who resonate? Is it people who have children who are neurodiverse? Like, where do you draw the line, and who gets more time to speak? People with ADHD will naturally take over the conversation sometimes. Those with dyspraxia might be more introverted and not get their opinions across. So with these things, I'd say take your time, you know, get it right, and make sure that it's not a token gesture and people feel like a sense of belonging. When we've done these groups right, the results have been tremendous. People feel valued, they feel heard, they feel listened to, and it's just about creating a safe space. You know, we're talking like a whole lifetime of feeling inadequate because you don't match up to the rest of society. You can't dissemble that in an hour, but over a lifetime or a working lifetime, you can build up a really nice community. And that's why I think it's really important to tell people, neurodiverse people, they don't fit into disabled group. They don't, but they are their own entity. So yeah, it's an ongoing journey, but I definitely think it's worthwhile.
Thanks, Nat. And before we go into the final wrap up, I've probably got the hardest question to ask both of you, which is really been going around in my head as you've been talking, which is this is a webinar call that's about how can organizations create a more neuro-inclusive environment. I would guess that most people that are listening to us now are already on the journey, using your word, Nat. They probably they've seen it on the Happiness Index website. They're already interested. And they've probably come along, and if they've learned as much as I have from Nat and Lucy, would have learned loads today and probably going away like energized on this subject. But they will then encounter people who will say, but why is this? Why should this be a priority? Why is this important? We've got lots of stuff going on in our organization. I'm going to go to you first, Lucy, because there's a question I've just made up, but I am thinking about the listener here. I don't want people getting as excited as I am now without us giving them a little tip on how they can explain to people the why of this. So why would you say this is important, Lucy?
Because you need the best talent to make your firm the best it can be, to give a good product to your customers, and to be excellent for your employees. And you don't turn any of that talent away. You find a way to harness it and make people brilliant.
I love that. I've locked that in, Lucy. Thank you. Nat, I don't even know if we can add anything to that. Is there anything we can add to that? It sounds great.
I mean, it's a really great answer. I think on a more like practical approach, you know, I run into a lot of people who do not care, you know, and that's kind of fine, I guess. You know, you meet people who work in HR or diversity and inclusion, they're on board, they're on the gravy train. And the people on here will preach it as converted, but there's lots of people who are not, and they care about the bottom line. But the bottom line is supporting people who are neurodiverse doesn't cost you more money. If anything, it saves you money. It helps with retention rate. It helps with your reputation. It helps with innovation. It gives you that diversity of thought. It shows you not just from a point of view where you're doing the thing because it's the right thing to do, but you're doing the right thing because it benefits the organization. I truly think organizations will not survive without embracing neurodiversity. We need this to kind of open up the debate. It really is a win-win for everyone. So I think you'd be silly not to embrace it with full arms.
Wow. Nat and Lucy, on behalf of everyone listening, I want to say thank you, because I have learnt loads and I'm going away inspired. So if everyone listening goes away like that, then I think we've done a really good job today. So Nat and Lucy, on behalf of everyone, thank you.
Lovely
Thank
stuff.
you.